The storm screamed across the Wyoming plains like a living thing, clawing at the small log cabin buried in snow. For 2 days straight, it had battered the walls, trying to rip the roof free. Eli Tate, a wide-shouldered rancher with grief carved into every line of his face, paid the storm no mind. Storms were nothing new. Pain was nothing new. He sat at his rough table, cleaning his rifle by the light of a flickering lantern. The only sounds inside were the scrape of metal and the hungry wind outside. Eli was a man who no longer expected visitors, not since his wife Sarah had died in the ice 2 winters before. The world had become small, just the cabin, the fields buried in snow, and the ghosts he tried not to think about. He had grown used to silence. Silence didn't hurt him. Silence didn't leave him. That was why the sound startled him. A muffled thump, a dragging scrape, a low moan. It didn't belong to the storm. Eli froze with the rifle in his hands. He waited. Maybe his mind was playing tricks. Loneliness did strange things to a man. He'd spoken to empty chairs before. He'd imagined footsteps outside, but then the sound came again, weak, desperate, real. He rose slowly and walked to the door, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. He cocked the rifle and rested it against his shoulder. The storm pushed hard against the walls. He listened. A soft scratching scraped against the door, faint but steady. Without waiting another second, he slid the bolt back. The wind punched the door out of his hand, slamming it into the wall. A wall of white blasted inside, swallowing the lantern flame and filling the room with stinging snow. Eli squinted into the storm, searching the porch. At first he saw nothing but swirling snow. Then he saw a shape. A small figure buried in a drift, half-covered, still as a grave. A worn dress, torn and frozen stiff. Bare feet blue with cold, a thin hand sticking out of the snow. A woman. "Hell," he muttered. He dropped the rifle inside the cabin and stepped into the storm. The cold sliced through his coat like knives, but he didn't stop. He knelt and brushed snow from her face. Her skin was ice pale. Her lips were cracked. Her hair clung to her shoulders in frozen strands. She was barely breathing. He scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, a bundle of frozen cloth and bone. The storm pushed against him, trying to steal her away, but he shoved through it and slammed the door shut behind them. Inside, the cabin felt warmer but still too cold for someone this close to death. He laid her on the animal skin rug by the fire. The lantern flickered back to life. The firelight revealed the truth. She wasn't just cold, she was hurt. Her dress was torn. Her side was dark with dried blood, frozen hard onto her skin. Her bare feet were swollen purple. Her face was bruised, a deep, ugly bruise across her cheek. Whoever she was, she hadn't just fought the storm. She had fought someone else first. Eli stared down at her, jaw clenched. This was trouble, the kind of trouble that didn't travel alone, the kind that brought guns and anger and questions. His first instinct was to put her back outside. Let the storm finish what it started. It would be easier, cleaner, safe. But then he saw her face again, young, terrified, too thin. He heard Sarah's voice in his memory, soft and warm. "Everything deserves a chance, Eli." He cursed under his breath. "Fine," he said. "Let's see what we're dealing with." He grabbed his kettle, filled it with water, and set it over the fire. His hands moved fast. He found his small box of bandages and his hunting knife. He knelt beside the stranger and touched her forehead. She was burning with fever and freezing at the same time. He took the knife and carefully slid it through the frozen dress, cutting it away from her side. The blade glided through the stiff fabric with a harsh tearing sound. When the cloth opened, she gasped. Her eyes flew open, pale blue, wild with fear. She didn't see safety. She didn't see warmth. She saw a man with a knife. "No!" she choked. Her voice was weak, broken. She tried to scramble away from him, but she had no strength. She pressed herself against the rug, shaking violently. "Hold still," Eli said, his voice flat and steady. You're bleeding. Quote, "Please," she whispered, raising her trembling hands to shield herself. "Don't." He grabbed her wrist to stop her from tearing the bandage loose. Her bones felt as fragile as twigs. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "You've been shot." He pulled the last piece of the dress aside. The wound was a long, angry tear across her hip. A graze, thank God, but filthy and swollen. Poison was already settling in. "It's swelling fast," he muttered. She flinched at his words. He dipped a rag into the hot water and pressed it gently to her skin. She hissed, the pain shooting through her body, but she didn't fight. "Either let me clean it," Eli said, "or go back out into that storm." She went still, the harshness cut through her fear. She clenched her jaw and turned her face to the wall, bracing herself. Eli cleaned the wound, working fast and rough, but careful enough not to hurt her more than he had to. As he worked, he noticed something on her shoulder, a dark mark burned into her skin, a brand, a letter M inside a circle. His stomach tightened. He had seen that mark once before, on a dead girl pulled from the river. This wasn't just trouble. This was the kind of trouble that could get a man killed. He said nothing. When the wound was cleaned, he covered it with pine tar salve and wrapped a fresh bandage around her waist. She lay still, shaking under the blanket he placed over her. Eli stood and turned away. His breath was tight in his chest. This girl had been running from something terrible, something that wasn't going to stop looking. But she was here now, under his roof. And the storm wasn't letting anyone leave. He stirred broth on the stove and set it beside her, not meeting her eyes. Then he walked to the door, grabbed his coat, and put on his hat. She watched him with fear wide in her gaze. "Where are you going?" she whispered. "To the barn," he said. "Check the stock." He didn't mention that most of his stock was dead. He didn't mention that he needed air. He didn't mention that he needed space to think. He stepped outside into the storm and let the cold bite into him. Inside the cabin, the stranger stared at the door, fragile and alone, wondering what kind of man had saved her and what kind of danger she had brought into his life. Why would a man risk everything for a stranger he didn't owe a thing to? That question sat with Eli all night as the storm kept pounding the walls. Inside the cabin, the girl, still half conscious, tossed and burned with fever. Her breath rattled, her skin hot, her body shaking with cold. Eli checked on her every hour, feeding the fire, forcing water into her mouth whenever she surfaced from the fever haze. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask who hurt her. He didn't ask why she was branded. Because deep inside, he already knew the answer. People didn't carry a mark like that unless men with power put it there. Men with guns. Men who owned the law. By morning, the storm still hadn't let up, but her fever finally broke. She woke with a gasp, sitting straight up on the cot, drenched in sweat, barely catching her breath. Eli was beside the fire, mending an old harness. He didn't look at her. "You're awake," he said, his voice flat. She blinked, trying to remember where she was. Her gaze fell on the blanket around her, then on the bandage on her hip, then on him. "You saved me," she whispered. "You were on my porch," he replied. "Didn't have much choice." She lowered her eyes. "You could have left me in the snow." He didn't answer. The truth hung in the air. He could have. He almost had. She pulled the blanket closer around her trembling body. "Thank you." Eli didn't nod, didn't turn. He just kept working the leather strap in his hands. "What's your name?" she asked. "Kora," she said softly when he didn't answer. "My name is Kora." Eli gave a short grunt, finally glancing at her with a guarded expression. "Eat!" He slid a bowl of warm broth across the table. Her hands shook as she lifted it. She drank with small, hungry sips, tears pricking her eyes at the taste of real food. She finished half the bowl before she spoke again. "Why'd you help me?" she whispered. Eli stared into the fire, jaw tight. "Didn't do it for you," quote. The hurt flashed across her face, small and quick. He cleared his throat, softening just slightly. "Storm would have killed anyone out there, that's all." But she didn't believe that. He could see it in her eyes. Hours passed. The storm kept screaming. Kora rested, but every movement sent pain through her hip. Once, while adjusting the blanket, she winced sharply. Eli was at her side in an instant. "Hold still," he ordered. She froze. His hands brushed her hip as he checked the bandage. She tensed like a terrified animal, her breath hitching. "Easy," he said quietly, not looking at her face. "I'm just checking." He saw the fear in her eyes, fear of him, not the pain, and that hurt worse than the storm. Every time he moved too fast, she flinched. Every time he reached toward her, she braced like she expected a blow. Eli wasn't a gentle man, but he wasn't cruel. Seeing her react like that made something inside him twist tight. "Who did this to you?" he asked finally. Her throat bobbed. She shook her head quickly. "Don't ask me that." "Someone's looking for you," he said. "Someone put a mark on you. Someone shot you." She swallowed hard, looking at the floor. "Please, I can't talk about it." He wanted to push. He didn't. Night came, and the storm eased a little. Eli fed the fire, washed the dishes, and tried not to look at the girl who sat curled on the cot, small and fragile under the heavy blanket. Then, suddenly, she whispered, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For being here, for bringing trouble to your door." "You don't know that," he said, but he did know it. And she did too. Hours later, while Eli slept upright in his chair, Kora woke, screaming. A nightmare. A deep, suffocating one. She gasped and thrashed until she fell off the cot, hitting the floor with a painful thud. Eli was on his feet instantly. "Easy, easy," he said, kneeling beside her. She scrambled back, pressing herself to the wall, breath fast, eyes wide. "No, no, don't touch me," she begged, shaking violently. He froze, hands in the air, voice steady. "You're safe." She didn't believe him, not at first. Not until her breathing slowed and the nightmare faded. Eli sat back, giving her space. She watched him quietly, her face pale in the lantern light. "You don't have to be scared of me," he said. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. The next morning, the blizzard died. The world outside was bright and quiet. Eli went out to check the land. When he returned, his face was grim. Smoke rose in the south. A thin line. Not from a chimney. From riders. "Kora," he said sharply, bolting the door behind him. "We got trouble." Her heart stopped. "No," she whispered. "They found me." Eli grabbed his rifle, pacing. "Tell me who's after you." Her hands twisted in her lap. "They'll kill me if they catch me." "And they'll take me too," he said. "So answer the question." She closed her eyes. "It's men from Casper, the sheriff, and others. Important men." Eli froze. "What men?" Her voice trembled. "Judge Hemlock," she whispered. "I tried to kill him." The cabin went dead silent. Eli stared at her. His jaw tightened. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. Then, the truth slammed into him. "You stabbed a judge," he said slowly. "They were selling us," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Girls, like cattle. I tried to stop him. I tried to save someone, but they're coming. They'll kill us both." She broke down, covering her face with her hands. Eli took a long, deep breath. His world had just changed, and not for the better. He knew what this meant. Men like that didn't let anyone walk away. But then he looked at her, shaking, terrified, alone. And something shifted inside him. A decision. "Get up," he said. She looked up at him in confusion. "We ride," he said. "We're not letting them take you." Her breath caught. You'd help me, after everything?" He nodded once. "You're not facing this alone." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of fear. They were something else. Hope. What would a man give up for someone he barely knew? For Eli Tate, the answer had already been decided the moment he told Kora she wouldn't face the world alone. The next few hours moved like a storm of their own. Eli saddled the horses. Kora, shaking from pain and fear, did her best to keep up. The southern smoke line grew darker. Closer. Riders were fanning out across the ridges, searching the valley inch by inch. "They're coming fast," Eli said as he tightened the cinch on his horse. Kora swallowed hard. "They'll take me, and they'll kill you." Eli stepped close, gripping her shoulders firmly, not in anger but in certainty. "I told you, they won't take you, not while I'm breathing." His voice didn't shake, not even a little. She looked at him, her eyes full of 1,000 things she couldn't say, gratitude, fear. Something deeper, something new. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't answer. He just nodded and lifted her onto the mare. They rode hard through the blinding snow, heading north. Away from the riders, away from the danger. When they finally stopped to rest, hidden among tall rocks, Kora leaned against Eli, exhausted. Everything wanted to break her. Her wound, her fear, her memories. But Eli's steady hand kept her anchored. "We can't run forever," she whispered. "I know," he said. That was when she told him the truth, the painful, hollow truth that had haunted her every day. "They took my daughter." Eli's breath caught. "I was 16, Kora said softly. "Poor, hungry. They said I was unfit, said I stole food. They took her and sold me off. I never saw her again." Her voice cracked, and she covered her face. Eli didn't speak. He didn't promise things he couldn't give. He just took her gently into his arms and held her while she cried. "You deserved better," he said quietly. "No one should live what you lived." Kora clung to him, crying until her body finally went still. That night, hidden among the rocks with the snow falling in a soft, quiet blanket, Eli kept watch. Kora slept curled close to him, her head against his shoulder. He didn't sleep at all. He couldn't. Because he knew the truth. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and the sheriff's men would come at sunrise. By dawn, the riders returned. Closer, too close. They burned Eli's barn, poisoned his well, left a message nailed to his door. "Hand over the girl." Kora stood beside him as he read the charcoal words. She was shaking, her fear rising like a tide. "This is my fault," she whispered. "All of it." "No," Eli said firmly. "This is their doing." "Not yours." "But your land. You'll lose everything." "I lost everything 2 winters ago," he said, looking her in the eyes. "This time I'm fighting back." She didn't argue. She didn't run. She didn't hide. Instead, she came up with a plan, a desperate one, a brilliant one. "We need proof," she said. "Words mean nothing against men like them." Eli frowned. "Proof of what?" "Of what he did," she whispered. "Of what they all did." Her eyes drifted to the old trunk in the corner, the one Eli hadn't touched since Sarah died. Inside, it was a dusty phonograph with unused wax cylinders. "You said it can record voices," Kora said. "If we can get the sheriff alone, he'll brag. He always does. He'll tell the truth to my face if he thinks he's won." "And we record him," Eli whispered, the plan clicking into place. "And take it to a real lawman." "A federal marshal," Kora said. It was a long shot, a dangerous one, but it was the only one. They set the trap at dusk. Eli sent a message through a lone trapper. Kora was surrendering, alone, weak, afraid. She would hand herself over, but only to Sheriff Grady. They hid the phonograph behind a pile of blankets. Set the wax cylinder. Eli lowered himself into the root cellar beneath the floorboards, rifle ready. Kora unlocked the door. And she waited. When Grady arrived, he swaggered into the cabin with a cruel smile. He believed he'd already won. Kora played the part of a broken girl perfectly. Frightened. Alone. Ready to beg. And Grady bragged. He bragged about the girls he sold, the judges he served, the money he made, the evil he'd done. Every word pressed into the soft wax. capturing the truth the world refused to hear. But when he reached for Kora, when he tried to pull her to him, Eli exploded from the floor with a roar. "Get your hands off her!" Grady spun, shocked. The room burst into chaos. Kora fought him. Eli held him at gunpoint. Grady reached for his pistol, but Kora drew first. Her hands shook, but her aim didn't. One shot, one instant, one truth set free. Grady fell. Silence swallowed the cabin. Kora stared at the man who had controlled her life for years, now lying still at her feet. Eli gently took the smoking pistol from her trembling hand. "It's over," he whispered. "You're free." But freedom required more than a single death. They rode for 4 days through freezing winds, carrying the recorded confession. When they reached Cheyenne, they walked into the office of the U.S. Marshal. Kora testified. Lily, the girl she'd tried to save, testified. The phonograph cylinder played every cruel word Grady confessed. The federal judge cleared Kora of all charges. Eli paid a small fine, and warrants were issued for every man involved in the corruption. Justice wasn't perfect, but for the first time, it was real. They returned to the ranch that spring. The snow melted, the land thawed. They rebuilt the barn, cleaned the well, carried water, mended fences, planted grain together, and every day the cabin felt more like home. One quiet evening, a wagon from the Children's Aid Society broke down nearby. Kora and Eli took in the orphans for the night. As Kora tended to them, one small girl hummed a tune. A tune Kora knew. A tune she had sung to a baby she never got to keep. She froze. Tears filled her eyes. That little girl looked back at her with bright blue eyes and pale straw-colored hair, just like hers. Where did you learn that song?" Kora asked in a trembling voice. The girl shrugged. "I don't know. I always knew it, I guess." Kora's breath broke. Her heart cracked open. After years of loss, pain, running, fighting, she had found her little girl again. Eli stood behind Kora, his hand gently resting on her shoulder, steady and warm. The storm that had once tried to kill them had become the storm that brought them together. The worst winter of their lives ended with the beginning of something new. A home. A future. A family. And for the first time, Kora no longer felt owned by the past. She was finally free.